You're just helping the customer achieve their goal, and they want you to help them, or they wouldn't be talking to you.
Welcome back. I'm delighted to have James Muir with me today. James from Utah in the USA. Welcome, James.
It's great to be on, John. Finally, I get to be on your show.
James is, he's a vice president of sales of an organization, so he's got his hands in there all the time. And on top of that, he's written a bestseller, The Perfect Close. So I want to raise a few subjects you raise in that book, James, and I'm really looking forward to this first discussion.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to.
Okay, The Perfect Close, you talk about the myths of closing, and I've seen articles you've written on this and so on, and they're very powerful. I want to really get you explaining to our audience what you mean about these myths and what they are.
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of salespeople, especially the new ones, when they first come on board, they go out and search how to do certain things. That's how they learn. They learn from the internet, right? And yet, if you go out and learn and search on the internet on how to close, you are going to be confronted with a ton of really, really bad information. There's a man out there, I'm sure you know who he is, Neil Rackham. He wrote a book called Spin Selling.
Yep, know it well.
And in the 80s, he conducted the largest face-to-face sales study ever conducted, involved over 35,000 face-to-face sales interactions. And in that study, they discovered a whole lot of very useful things about selling and closing specifically. And so many of these things that you have there, when you go search, for example, always be closing, things like that, these have been tested scientifically and have proven to be false. And yet they still continue to permeate the whole sales universe out there. And so part of what I did in the book is I wanted to dispel these myths so people would stop using these dysfunctional techniques that are out there.
They're bloody dreadful. I hate them. All sorts of manipulative and things that really are against building a relationship with a client and building trust and so on. And yes, they may have led to some sales, and I question why, but in the end, it's doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, so and that's what the science shows. In fact, listeners may be interested in knowing that Neil Rackham actually tested people's attitudes and their ability to use these different closes. And what he found is the people that believed in them and used them are actually performed 21% worse than those who didn't. Right. So if you have any faith in these gambits or these techniques that are being thrown around there, I would recommend against them. And then there's a whole ton of them. Like, so always be closing is one. We all know that one because of Glengarry Glen Ross. And Alec Baldwin made that famous. But the truth is, past the first attempt, there's actually a negative correlation between closing attempts and closing success. Mm-hmm. So you basically, your best shot, you do need to ask something. Right? You need to ask at least once. If you're asking just one time, will increase your sales by 33%. Okay. Oh, and this might blow your mind. 50 to 90% of all sales interactions actually end without anybody asking for any kind of a sale or commitment at all. 50 to 90%. That's just a mind-blowing statistic to me. And it varies a little bit per industry. But 50% is like the low number, and I think the reason for that is I think most of us instinctively realize that these techniques, these gambits, that they actually hurt trust, they damage trust, and we don't want to damage trust. And since we don't want to damage trust, and we can't think of anything else to do, we just don't do anything, right? At least that's what I used to do.
It's interesting. I have a standard sales process, and we all know that sales is not a direct line through a process, but it helps guide us. And in that process, I don't use the word close when we get to that. I use the word commit, and it's a mutual commitment. And you're right. It's when you get to that point, it's almost natural. It just happens. And of course, we have to consciously say, we are at that step. Can we move forward now? But it's so simple.
It really isn't that complicated. I think the idea that people get so uptight about it and they're so self-focused instead of being present with the customer and thinking about what's right for them, that they get all nervous about it. What's the right thing, or what's the right timing? What's exactly the right thing to say? And it's really not as complicated as people make it.
So there you talked about a major myth, the using those manipulative type actions. What other myths have you got in mind?
Well, the one that surprised me the most is you mentioned earlier, some of these techniques occasionally work, right? Like, so the alternate choice close, right? I say, hey, do you want it in blue or green? Or do you want it 500 or do you want 600, right? Either way, they're picking you, right? This is the idea. And as it turns out, that can work on small sales, right? It can. But Neil Rackham tested that. And what he found is that when the sale is small, it actually, using those techniques can improve sales closure by about 4%. Okay, so you can get about a 4% boost if you use them. On the flip side, when you're working with a large sale, what he found is that there was a negative correlation. In fact, it was 9% of a decrease. So you're less successful when you use these techniques on a larger sale. So the big question is, John, what's the threshold? At what point does a sale go from being small to being large? And you want to know what it is? It's $109.
Wow.
That's it. $109. So, hey, if what you sell is less than $109, man, maybe it's now the right time to whip out the double reverse close, right? But everybody I work with sells things more than $109. So if anything larger than that, it's going to backfire on you to use any of these tactics.
I'd be very surprised if anybody out there is listening to this is selling anything under thousands of dollars.
Is that really, that's order taking, that's not professional selling.
That's right. And these days machines can do that. You don't need a salesperson to do that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else in the myths?
Sure. Well, so I mean, the myth that I actually fell for is that the sale would close itself, right? I believe that for much of my career, but I'll just jump right to the data on this one. And what the data shows is that if you make just how Neil Rackham says it, he goes, the sales won't close itself. Right. So you do have to make some kind of an attempt to advance or to close the sale. And if you just make one attempt, right, then you'll improve your chances by 36%. So just asking one way. And so the real key, and hopefully we'll share this in one of your episodes together, is how do you ask for the sale in a way that's no pressure and it's non-confrontational. That's what you're looking for. If you're doing that, then what you're really doing, guys, is you're facilitating. You're just helping the customer achieve their goal, and they want you to help them, or they wouldn't be talking to you, right? If they could do it on their own, they wouldn't need you, right? And so they really want you to help them, help facilitate all of their little decisions that ultimately culminate in the big decision.
It's great advice, and I talk about that all the time. We've got to understand what the buyer's going through, the buying journey, etc., and help them through that process. And the organisation or people that help them through that process best are more likely to be the people that at the end of the day saying, well, we're now to the point of gaining a commitment. Are you ready to go forward? Yep, done.
Yep, exactly right.
Let's talk about that more. I really want to talk to you about best practices in closing and so on and so forth. So let's get together again soon.
Okay, I'll be happy to share it. See you then.
James, thank you very much. Look forward to next time.